The slap cracked through the dusty village courtroom like lightning in dead silence. Asha, only 19, staggered slightly, her cheek reddening. But her eyes didn't water. She stared ahead, motionless, like a statue carved from pain. Her mother collapsed at the elder's feet, sobbing, "Please." She didn't know the boy was already engaged. But the headman raised his gnarled staff. A girl who brings shame must marry to repay it. Her father yanked Asha's wrist roughly, his voice spitting venom. "You ruined your name. Fix it tomorrow." Villagers pressed in, whispering like wind through leaves, their judgment sharp as knives. Asha's kurti tore as she was dragged out, stumbling barefoot across the floor. Outside, the morning sun crept in, illuminating a single rooster crowing indifferently. Asha's eyes flicked toward the gate at the village's edge. Her life had been sentenced, but her soul had not yet spoken its final word. Outside the courthouse, Asha sat on a crumbling stone, her face blank but burning beneath the morning sun. Around her, villagers murmured and drifted away, leaving only silence and dust. Her hands fiddled with a loose thread on her sleeve. "Marry him," her father had said. Or, "Don't come back." The boy, they claimed, was from another village. Older, richer. She knew nothing of him but his price. Her lips parted in a whisper. "There has to be more than this." Her eyes didn't water. They watched the dirt road leading beyond the banyan tree at the village's edge. That road, unknown, terrifying, was the only place she hadn't yet been beaten down. At home, the fire crackled in the corner while her mother stirred an empty pot. Asha entered slowly, the wooden door creaking behind her. Her mother didn't look up. "He agreed to the dowry. It's done," she said flatly. Asha crouched beside her. "Ma, do you want this?" Her mother finally looked at her, eyes rimmed in red. "Want?" she repeated, voice cracked. "We survive. That's all we've ever done." A log snapped in the fire. The room smelled of smoke and boiled water. Asha touched her mother's hand gently. "I want more," she whispered. Her mother didn't answer. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Asha lay on the cot, eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling, listening to the night animals and the dull hum of insects. Her body ached from being dragged, but her mind hurt more. The word, wife, felt like a cage. She curled into herself, shawl wrapped tight, heart pounding. A shadow flickered on the wall as the lantern burned low. Her thoughts whispered, "What if I ran? What if I became someone they couldn't control?" The air was heavy, still. She didn't cry. She just stared. At sunrise, Asha stood at the village well, hands raw from pulling the bucket. Girls nearby laughed and whispered. "That's the cursed one," one said, not softly enough. Asha didn't react. She lifted the brass pot with practiced grace. Just as she turned to leave, a deep rumble echoed in the distance. A black SUV rolled into view, dust trailing behind. The villagers froze. Engines like that didn't belong here. Not among huts and chickens. Asha's heart skipped. Her grip on the pot tightened. Was this the man? Or was fate simply shifting shape again? The SUV parked beside the well, its engine cutting like a blade through village quiet. A tall man stepped out, well-groomed, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed foreign wealth. Dust clung to his black shoes as he surveyed the scene with unreadable eyes. Asha froze, her pot balanced perfectly. The villagers murmured, "That must be the groom's man," someone whispered. But the stranger said nothing. He approached the elder's hut without a glance at anyone. Asha's heart pounded. This man didn't belong here, not with the clean lines of his clothes, the confidence in his stride. He didn't look cruel. But he didn't look kind either. Just detached. Like he was calculating a transaction. She lowered the pot and turned away. Whatever was coming, it was here now. Inside the elder's hut, the man removed his glasses slowly and laid them beside a folder wrapped in plastic. Asha's father sat stiffly, trying to hide the nervous tremble in his hand. The headman leaned forward. "So you represent him?" The stranger nodded once. "The groom will arrive tonight. He asks for privacy. The girl will be delivered before sunset." Asha's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. Her fate was being finalized like cattle at market. No one asked what she wanted. The folder was passed across the table. Her father opened it, eyes widening at the crisp rupee notes stacked within. He nodded without hesitation. Outside, Asha stood just beyond the curtain, hearing everything, and understanding for the first time the price of her silence. Asha walked to the edge of the fields alone, the folder's image burned into her mind. Her price. She stared across the open farmland, wind tugging gently at her scarf. She remembered dreams she'd once whispered to the stars, of books, of cities, of a life beyond rice and dust. "You're strong," her mother used to say, "like riverstone, worn but unbreakable." But even stone cracks under pressure. She crouched, scooping a handful of dry soil, letting it slip between her fingers. Marriage. Marriage. To a stranger. Bought like grain. She whispered, "I don't even know his face." Her breath caught as she turned and saw him, far off, standing at the edge of the road. Watching. The man from the SUV died. Not moving. Just watching. The preparations began like ritual punishment. Asha was bathed, oiled, dressed in borrowed bridal reds, clothes too fine for her mud-stained life. Her hair was twisted painfully into braids, jewelry she'd never seen clamped onto her ears and arms. She sat on the wooden stool like a doll waiting to be boxed. Women bustled around, humming old songs about obedient wives and dutiful girls. No one looked her in the eye. Her mother pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Do not speak, do not resist, just endure." Asha's lips parted to protest, but no sound came. Only the metallic clang of bangles as her hands fell to her lap. And then, silence. Deep and still. The calm before surrender. Or war. As the sun began to dip, Asha stood by the courtyard door, ready to be led like a lamb. The stranger from earlier waited near the gate, his gaze fixed on the sky. When she stepped outside, their eyes met. Just for a moment. No smile. No kindness. Only tension, sharp and charged. Then he turned and walked toward the SUV. Her father nudged her forward. "Go," he whispered, voice suddenly hollow. Each step felt like a thunderclap in her chest. Chickens scattered, children peeked from behind walls. Asha climbed into the back seat, the door shut with a final thud. No words were spoken as the engine roared. Her village faded behind them, swallowed by dust. What lay ahead wasn't marriage. It was a mystery she hadn't chosen, but would soon unravel. The car sped past rice paddies and dry riverbeds, its leather seat suffocatingly silent. Asha sat in the back, hands clenched in her lap. The man beside the driver, her groom's proxy, made no effort to speak. He only glanced at her once in the rearview mirror, unreadable. When they finally reached the estate, her breath caught. This was no village home. It was a mansion hidden behind iron gates and manicured hedges. White columns, marble steps, a courtyard with fountains. Asha's feet touched stone as she stepped out, unsure whether she'd been rescued or buried alive. "This is your home now," the man said quietly. Asha didn't reply. She just stared at the house. Too clean, too grand, too unreal. A place that could swallow a girl like her whole. A maid guided Asha through endless hallways that smelled of polished wood and rosewater. No one greeted her. No one explained. Just silence, thick and unfamiliar. The room she was shown to had silk curtains and gold trim, a far cry from her mud walls. Asha touched the bedding cautiously, as if it might vanish. Her reflection in the mirror startled her, red-draped, heavy with ornaments, eyes hollow. A knock broke the silence. A tray of food was placed on the table, rice, lentils, sweetmeat. Asha sat without eating. Hunger wasn't louder than confusion. Somewhere behind these walls lived her husband. Or her jailer. Or maybe both. That night, she heard voices, low, commanding. Through a crack in the door she saw him. The groom. Tall, lean, dressed casually in a linen shirt. He wasn't old. Not cruel-looking. But distant. Like someone used to power, not people. "Is she settled?" he asked someone. The reply was muffled. "Don't frighten her," he added before walking away. Asha's breath caught. That was her husband. That was the man who now owned her name. She backed away from the door. It wasn't fear in her chest. It was fire. He hadn't even met her. And yet, he had decided everything. The next morning, Asha was summoned to breakfast. She entered a grand dining room, lined with glass walls and chandeliers. He was already there, her husband, sipping black coffee, scrolling on a phone. "Sit," he said without looking. She obeyed, stiff and silent. "You'll be safe here," he added, finally meeting her eyes. "You're not here for love, Asha. You're here because it's necessary, that's all." She blinked. "Necessary for what?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and left the room. The silver cutlery gleamed untouched beside her as the silence returned, colder this time. Later that day, Asha explored the estate alone. It wasn't curiosity, it was survival. She found locked doors, long corridors, silent portraits of ancestors she didn't recognize. A library, untouched. A music room, dustless but unloved. Every corner echoed wealth. But none of it felt lived in. She stood before a giant window that overlooked the garden, manicured and perfect. It all looked beautiful. But nothing felt free. Her reflection in the glass stared back like a ghost. She whispered to herself, "This isn't marriage. It's a transaction." And just as she turned, she caught a glimpse of him again, watching her from the top of the stairs. Asha found the study by accident. Tucked behind a thick velvet curtain, the door wasn't locked. Inside, shelves towered with ledgers and contracts. On the desk lay an open folder, her folder. She scanned the pages, breath tightening. There were photos of her from before the wedding. At the well, at the market, even outside the courthouse. Dated, filed, organized. Surveillance. Her name. Her village. The dowry price. A legal contract. Her hand trembled as she turned to the pages. This wasn't just marriage. It was research. She was chosen. And not for love. A voice behind her said calmly, "You weren't meant to see that." She turned. He stood in the doorway, expression unreadable, but eyes no longer detached. They were watching, weighing, waiting. "I did choose you," he said, stepping forward slowly. "But not for what you think." Asha backed away, folder clutched to her chest. "You had me followed. I had you protected," he corrected. "Your village was tearing you apart. I stepped in." She laughed bitterly. "By buying me?" He didn't answer at first. Then, softly, "I needed someone untouched by greed. Someone honest. You were tested. And you passed." Asha's voice broke. "So I'm a project?" He stepped closer. "You're my partner, if you'll allow it." Her silence filled the room. She didn't know what stunned her more, his calm, his wealth, or the fact that somewhere deep inside, she didn't feel afraid anymore. Only angry. And powerful. That night, Asha didn't sleep. She sat by the large bay window, wrapped in silence. Her wedding jewelry still clung to her like shackles, but her mind raced like fire through dry grass. He had been watching her for months. Every step of her downfall had been recorded, yet she'd never broken. Was that why he chose her? Not love. Not pity. But because she didn't bend? Her reflection stared back at her with unfamiliar strength. "If I'm your partner," she whispered to the night, "then I get to choose the terms." The stars blinked above, quiet witnesses to the moment the girl stopped surviving and started deciding. At dawn, she walked into his office, uninvited. He looked up, surprised, but didn't speak. She placed the folder on the desk. "If I stay," she said clearly, "I won't be your secret. I won't be hidden. I won't be owned." He studied her, then nodded slowly. "Fair." She leaned forward. "And if I leave, it's my choice, not yours, not my father's, not the village's." He exhaled through his nose. "Understood." There was a beat of silence. Then he added, "You're stronger than I expected." "I always was," she said, turning away. "You just had money. I had to have fire." Later that day, Asha stood in the mirror wearing a simple blue sari, her own, not borrowed, not gifted. Her jewelry was gone. Her eyes were clear. Downstairs, staff moved quietly. The air no longer smelled of fear. She didn't know if she'd stay in this house forever. She didn't even know if she would love him. But she knew something else now. She was no longer poor. Not because of his money, but because of her voice. She turned from the mirror and walked out of the room, not with hesitation but purpose. Not a bride. Not a prisoner. Just a girl who finally remembered her worth. For 2 days, the mansion was silent. The man, her husband, vanished into locked rooms and meetings. Asha explored, not as a guest, but as someone studying a battlefield. Then, on the 3rd morning, she was summoned. Not to a bedroom but to a boardroom. She stepped inside, barefoot, sari draped simply. 12 men in suits sat at a long glass table. And at the head, him. Calm. Confident, dight. "This is Asha," he said. "My wife. And from today she holds 50% of this company." Gasps. Dull. Shifts in chairs. Asha stood frozen. "Why?" she asked quietly. He looked at her with the first trace of softness. "Because I don't need another pawn. I need someone who survived fire." And for the first time Asha didn't feel afraid. She felt seen. She didn't understand business. But she understood power. And silence. So she listened. She watched the board, each man avoiding her gaze like she'd appeared from a storm. Her husband slid a folder toward her. "Everything here belongs to you now," he said. "Learn it." Her hands hovered above the pages, then settled. "I will," she said softly. "But on my terms." One of the older men scoffed. "A village girl can't run a company." Asha looked up, eyes cold. "A village girl survives hunger, betrayal, and being sold like a goat. You really think a spreadsheet scares me?" The room fell quiet. She didn't need their approval, just their awareness. Later, she stood in the courtyard garden, wind teasing her sari, her fingers brushing the edge of the marble railing. He approached slowly. "You didn't have to speak like that," he said. "Yes, I did," she replied. "Because no one else ever has." He folded his arms. "I never planned to marry." "Then why me?" she asked. He paused. "Because you weren't afraid to be hated. That kind of strength doesn't come from comfort." She turned to face him fully. "Strength isn't what I wanted," she said. "But it's what I earned. Don't mistake it for loyalty." His lips twitched. Almost a smile. "I wouldn't dare." The space between them was no longer silent. It was charged with history, fire, and something unspoken. Word reached the village. Asha, the girl they pitied, the one they sold, was now someone. Rumors ran wild. Married to a rich man, living in a palace, signing contract. Her father sat on the porch, staring at the same cracked earth. Neighbors whispered. Children asked questions. The same village court that condemned her now spoke her name with awe. But Asha didn't send letters. Didn't return. She had nothing to say. They hadn't saved her. They'd surrendered her. She didn't seek revenge. Only silence. The kind that humbles. The kind that echoes. Asha stood at the mirror again, no longer searching for the girl who once cried behind village walls. She wore no makeup, no jewels, just confidence. The house, once cold and foreign, now hummed with her footsteps. He entered without knocking. They're waiting in the lobby, he said. She turned. Let them wait. He nodded. No challenge. Just understanding. She walked past him, each step calm but irreversible. The man who once bought her had become the man who followed her lead. And she wasn't the girl who had been chosen. She was the woman who now chose. Weeks passed. The house changed, but more than that, Asha changed. She walked its halls like she belonged, no longer searching for exits. She started asking questions in meetings, correcting numbers, speaking when others stayed silent. One morning, she entered the study and found him already there reading. You should be careful, she said. One day they'll stop underestimating me. He looked up, amused. I hope they do. That's when you'll truly burn. She smirked. She didn't need his validation, but it didn't sting anymore. He wasn't a rescuer. And she wasn't a girl waiting to be saved. They sat in the quiet. Not as strangers. Not yet as lovers. But as something new. Equals. Her confidence didn't go unnoticed. Whispers began to shift. She's more than just the wife, they said. She's got fire. Asha sat through negotiations and left men twice her age tongue-tied. She handled budgets, resolved disputes, built a new women's scholarship fund. Why women? Someone asked. She replied, because no one looked for me when I was drowning. I want them to know someone will. The press circled. Curious. A village bride turned executive, they called her. But she hated that label. She wasn't a fairy tale. She was fact. She had crawled out of a system that broke girls. And now she was rebuilding it brick by brick. She finally returned to the village, not as a wife, not as a warning, but as a woman who had come back to build. Girls watched her from doorways. Boys whispered. Her old school, once crumbling, now had supplies, teachers, computers. No grand speech. No ceremony. She just walked the dirt roads, smiled at the familiar faces, and kept moving. Her father didn't come out to meet her. That was fine. That was fine. She wasn't here for closure. The village had broken her. It had taught her exactly what kind of world she'd never recreate. And now it stood watching her, not in pity, but in awe. She wasn't theirs anymore. She was her own. That evening, back at the estate, she found him waiting in the garden. I heard you visited the village, he said. She nodded. They didn't expect me to come back. Did it help? He asked. No, she said truthfully. But it reminded me why I left. They sat together on the stone bench. For a long time, neither spoke. Then he reached for her hand, gentle, no pressure. She didn't pull away. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was safety. And space. And the understanding that she could walk away anytime. She looked up at the stars and whispered, I like the silence now. It's mine. The next morning she stood on the balcony, breeze catching her dupatta. Below, the city was alive. Her phone buzzed, an invite to a national conference. Another to headline a women's panel. She set the phone down. Her journey hadn't begun in comfort. It began with a slap, a silence, and a choice. Asha smiled, quiet and proud. Not because she had risen, but because she had rebuilt. From dust. From betrayal. From nothing. She didn't owe them forgiveness. But she had taken back her voice. Her future wasn't borrowed. It was earned. And today, finally, she chose joy. The auditorium buzzed as powerful voices filled the room, but when Asha took the stage, silence followed her like a spotlight. No title. No husband beside her. Just her name on the screen. Asha Rani, founder, the Fire Circle Foundation. She scanned the crowd. CEOs. Journalists. Former critics. You know my story, she began. But I didn't come here to relive it. I came to prove that even a girl forced into marriage can build empires if she stops asking permission. The applause came like thunder, but she didn't flinch. She stepped off the podium, Head high, heels sharp, sari trailing behind her like armor. She had not been gifted power. She had taken it. Backstage, she sat alone, eyes closed, breathing steady. She wasn't nervous. She was grounded. Her assistant entered. The press is waiting. Asha opened her eyes. Let them wait. For years she had rushed to obey, to survive, to prove. Now she understood the strength of silence, of making others wait for her. Her phone buzzed. A message from him. You shined. I'm proud. She smiled but didn't reply. He knew. He didn't own this moment, she did. She stood, rolled her shoulders back, and walked toward the exit. Not to pose. Not to gloat. Just to move forward. Outside reporters swarmed. Asha, how does it feel to go from forced bride to CEO? One asked. She paused, turned slowly, and looked straight into the camera. It feels like I never needed anyone's permission to begin with. Flashbulbs exploded, but she didn't blink. She walked past them, hand raised slightly, not in a wave, but in quiet refusal. No interviews. No autographs. This wasn't her victory lap. Pitch. It was her life continuing. And no headline could contain her anymore. That night, she stood in the kitchen of the home she now called hers. Not a mansion, but a space she chose. She brewed tea. Barefoot, unbothered by cameras or expectations. He entered, still in his suit, loosened tie. You didn't call, he said. I didn't need to, she replied. He nodded, leaned against the counter. They didn't touch. Didn't need to. There was no power game left to play. Just mutual presence. She poured 2 cups. Handed him one. You followed me once, she said softly. Now, I lead. You okay with that? He smiled. He always was. No grand kiss. No sweeping romance. Just a sip of tea, shared between equals. In the final light of dawn, Asha returned to the balcony one last time. She stood still as the sun rose, no longer chasing escape, but embracing place. Her voice echoed softly, not to anyone but herself. They tried to sell me. They tried to break me. They thought that was the end. Her eyes narrowed at the horizon. That was the beginning. She turned not slowly, not dramatically, just confidently. And as she walked back inside, the wind caught her sari, lifting it like a flag. There was no score to settle. No one left to prove wrong. Only one truth remained. She had become the kind of woman they'd never forget.